Hey guys, welcome to Off the Top Rope here on the Off the Mic Sports Network. It's been a while. Didn't get a chance to really scope through Crown Jewel. It was a pretty by the numbers show. I didn't like a lot of the concept behind the two main matches on that show. But we're past that in WWE. And a big week, not just obviously because of the political stuff and the election here in the United States, but that moved NXT to Wednesday night against AEW. And I can't give an actual number, but this feels like at least the third or fourth time in the last couple of years where NXT has beaten AEW head to head. This wasn't as handily as the time where AEW started early on Tuesday last month. But NXT from the 2300 arena with an ECW feel to it wins out by almost 100,000 viewers, wins out in the 18 to 49. What does this tell you? This tells you what I have been trying to say for the latter portion of this year is that even when it comes to NXT, the fans and the younger audience of wrestling is choosing NXT over AEW. And if you would have told me that about 4 or 5 years ago, I would have told you were insane. But NXT has completely reworked its image. We've talked about that here on this channel. Newer, fresher superstars, better storytelling. Shawn Michaels has developed one of the best women's divisions in all of professional wrestling. It was showcased in that main event, in that 10-woman tag. Jordan Grace is brought in. You obviously have the women bookended that NXT show last night, which is an awesome thing for the world of professional wrestling. You had a Philadelphia street fight between Lola Vice and Jada Parker, which got a little bit ridiculous with a brick spot and a bunch of crazy weapon spots. It was good to see Dawn Marie. It's the first time I've seen her probably in 20 years. That in terms of and she still looks really good, but so you have that match to kick off the show, and then at the tail end of it, you've got the future of the women's division. Obviously, Roxanne Perez, Cora Jade, and the Fatal Influence going up against Zarya, Stephanie Vaquer, Julia, Jordan Grace, and Kalani Jordan. So you have that 10-woman tag to end the show. And since going to the CW, it just feels like this momentum that's been going on with NXT has really just, been heightened to a new level. And this was a different type of a show for NXT to go to, a lot more nostalgia based. With it being in NXT, RVD was on this show. You had Nunzio on this show. That was a trip for me to see Nunzio in his 50s, still working and looking in pretty damn good shape in a match against Tony D'Angelo. You have Trick Williams teaming up with Bubba Ray Dudley against Ethan Page and Rich Holland. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of Trick Williams taking a pin, but I understand why they did it. They needed to establish a new challenger, and it was kind of a fluke pin for Rich Holland. But they're doing things in NXT that are inherently interesting, and you compare that side by side with what's going on in AEW, and why a lot of people are going away is Tony Khan is living in this bubble where the only people that matter to him are the internet geeks and marks, or the 2,000 people that show up at his stadiums. And he thinks that everything is okay. And I could count on my fingers several amounts of segments during that AEW show that it's just like you're kind of just throwing darts at the dartboard and hoping that they hit a bullseye. Mercedes Moné, listen, the Raquel Rodriguez storyline in WWE, she's being portrayed as a really bad bodyguard. Let's just knock that out. But it pales into comparison what AEW's been doing with Camille. They did a segment in AEW on Dynamite where Camille is supposed to run over Chris Statlander, who, by the way, Chris Statlander not too long ago was a heel and was going after Willow Nightingale, one of the most beloved baby faces in AEW. So there's that. So you have Camille being told by Mercedes Moné to run over and effectively commit, manslaughter on Chris Statlander. And then they pan to the car, and Mercedes Moné is like, "Oh, you missed her," in her annoying tone. And it's just like, they've really done, and some of this might be on Mercedes too, who I think is a pioneer for women's wrestling, at least for where it is now. They've really done a outstanding job, and I mean outstanding in the negative way, of making Mercedes Moné the most forgettable and most kind of just distasteful, unlikable person. And that's not a good heel. So you've got segments like that. You've still got this Jon Moxley, they're called the Death Riders now. You got this Jon Moxley faction going up against AEW and Orange Cassidy, who I like Orange Cassidy. I like Orange Cassidy. He's not a main eventer. Orange Cassidy's fighting for the World Championship at Full Gear at the end of the month. That's ridiculous. When you're doing a fighting for AEW type thing, somebody who's going to stand up for AEW, Orange Cassidy, all due respect to him, he's a phenomenal professional wrestler. I've always enjoyed watching him. He is not the type of guy who should be standing toe-to-toe with Jon Moxley in this type of gimmick. Also, we still have no idea what the motivations of Jon Moxley are in terms of, they want to save AEW. But why? Is there a higher power talking them? They've really done a terrible job of telling this story. So that's another part of this that's really inherently wrong. And then, whereas NXT was dipping into nostalgia from 15, 20 years ago, AEW and their new high-price signing, Bobby Lashley, and the Hurt Syndicate, which was dumped 4 years ago, which admittedly I hated. I thought the Hurt business in WWE was a great idea, and that was a misfire, one of many by Vince McMahon. But here we are in 2024, 4 years after it happened, and there's a reason why WWE moved off of all of these gentlemen. I like MVP. I like Shelton Benjamin. I like Bobby Lashley. But you are clearly seeing a more youthful movement under Triple H. And when you're a company that is struggling, like AEW is, and you guys can argue with me in the comments about how I feel about this. This is a widely known thing, and the numbers back it up. Whether it be attendance, whether it be ratings, anything, or merchandise or anything. AEW is faltering right now. Yes, they are a newer business, and they started off hot, but that's kind of led them to this point of, hey, they're hitting a crossroads right now. But one thing that you don't do as a business that is struggling is go out and pay more money for talent that you don't need. I'm actually interested in what they're going to do with Swerve Strickland and the Hurt Syndicate here. I'm really interested to see what it does, because I think Swerve Strickland's great. I think he was an awesome world champion, even though there were some moments where I questioned his booking. They did a really good job towards the latter end, and they made him look pretty badass in losing to Bryan Danielson in that match at All In earlier this year. But it almost feels like that they're running out of ideas, so they had to go pay the next guy who was available, like a Bobby Lashley, who WWE had nothing for. And reading some of the stories, some of Bobby Lashley's ideas were not great. There was a kind of a racist angle that they had with him and Gunther that Bobby proposed. And you wonder why WWE might have passed and moved on. And it was probably a good idea, but the one thing that you don't do, and I've said this through the entire year, the one really high-profile signing that has worked out for AEW this year is Will Ospreay. Will Ospreay has been awesome this year. You can say what you want about his wrestling style, but the fans are connecting with him. His matches have been great. His matches have delivered. It's almost impossible for that guy to have a bad match. You can debate about his wrestling style, but Will Ospreay's fucking great. But Mercedes Moné, that has flopped. Kazuchika Okada, that has flopped. And that's a bigger story, too, because now the Young Bucks and Jack Perry was nowhere on the show, but the Young Bucks, they're gone. Private Party beat them for the tag team titles, which was very awesome. I'm very happy for them. A wonderful story for one of the original tag teams of AEW, but it feels like it happened like a year or two too late, and they just kind of forced it to try and create a moment or something for the brand. And yeah, it's just like none of these high-profile signings have worked. So that's my concern with bringing in Bobby Lashley, bringing in MVP, bringing in Shelton Benjamin as the Hurt Syndicate. We'll see what they do with Swerve Strickland, but the way that they booked this match for Full Gear is like Swerve just comes out just outraged and just yells at Bobby Lashley saying, "Hey, let's do this match," and then MVP just accepts it. It's okay, like it's just like it's the most basic fundamental thing of booking, and it's just like they're kind of just going through the motions and just hoping that their niche audience is going to accept it. And that's one thing if you admit that you are a niche product, but they keep trying to present themselves as this alternative and as this challenger to WWE. But when you are losing significantly in multiple head-to-head situations against WWE's developmental brand, let's call it what it is. NXT is a developmental brand. They have lost in the last 2 months at least 3 times head-to-head. And I told you guys that this was going to happen. I said this from jump when the CW thing was coming into fruition and we were winding down the clock on USA. I told you that when NXT went to CW, they were going to start clobbering AEW. And it's happened on a regular basis. And it's going to continue to happen until AEW starts coming up with better storylines. Another example from AEW, Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho won a championship. He won the Ring of Honor championship. Why? I don't know. They're trying to get a TV deal. Okay. He's now the Nueve. I don't care. They've done a really good job of damaging Chris Jericho's legacy. And I think a lot of that's Jericho and Tony Khan basically not having the balls to tell him no. So that's another problem. And then the main event of this show, admittedly was fun. With Kyle Fletcher now going full heel, teaming with Konosuke Takeshita against Ricochet, and a returning Will Hobbs, which is very awesome, because I think Will Hobbs is fucking awesome. I think Powerhouse Hobbs is a fantastic big guy, and he just got victimized by some bad injury luck. But the way that he was utilized in this main event made him kind of forgetful part, which is really interesting. So that's a little bit of a strange element. You've got Adam Cole now being involved with the Don Callis family because MJF hires the Don Callis family, and the MJF Adam Cole thing has been just, some of it's just sheer, just injury, just, unfortunate stuff on the injury front. But based off what we had been told for months, this is honest to God one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in wrestling. Because you've got MJF doing the same thing that he's been doing. I've said it here on this channel and I've said it on this show. He's the same character he was 5 years ago. I think he's a lot of fun. I think he's as good as there is on the mic. Young rising star. But he has not evolved one bit. One bit. Because here we are with another high-profile feud where, hey, you've got to win multiple matches to get to me at a pay-per-view. We've done that with Wardlow. We've done that with Jericho. We've done that with Cody. Like, when are we going to just change our methods and evolve in storytelling? And then Adam Cole has got this thing going on with the Undisputed Kingdom where him and Roderick Strong could conceivably fight their way to get a match at the pay-per-view Full Gear. And now there's a situation where if both of them win their 3 matches to get to MJF, it could be a triple threat match. What sense is there in that? This feud has never really involved Roderick Strong. This feud has always been about Adam Cole. Roderick Strong was a secondary piece in this. I love Roderick Strong. But he was presented as a joke in this thing, yelling, Adam! Just yelling all of these things and just yelling people's names. We're supposed to take him seriously? Adam Cole's been injured on and off for the last 2 years, and he's lost a significant amount of weight to the point of where I'm not going to engage in this type of stuff where Like, there's a lot of body shaming going on in the wrestling community. I still think Adam Cole is freaking awesome, but when you're in a culture and you're in a wrestling culture, especially considering what Adam Cole was thought of 5-6 years ago, and then you've dealt with all these injuries, and then the image of him being on video games, it's not the best look, especially when you're going up against somebody like an MJF to be presented in the way that he is. And then he has a match with Malachi Black where he's kicking out of the spinning heel kick, the end, as it's called, or the Black Mass, as it was called in WWE. He's kicking out of stomps. It's like we're making him look invincible. It's like, okay, this guy's lost a lot in AEW. It's just, there's a lot of disjointedness, as you guys can tell from like the way that I've been talking about these shows. Whereas the NXT show, yeah, these were one-time deals that were built up to for a couple of weeks. These aren't like long-term storylines that are just resuming out of nowhere with like, or they're just these long-term storylines, whereas with the Jon Moxley, that just don't make any sense. So it's just like, it's like if you're trying to like grow your business, you're asking people to like invest in watching your product. It's almost like an election, to be honest with you. It's like you're asking people to vote for you, and that's what this really was. We'll make the election tie in here, even though I didn't really want to do it. It's like NXT and AEW were on at the same time on Wednesday night, and they were asking you to gain their vote. And what did the ratings tell you? More people voted, more people picked NXT, a developmental product with a bunch of relative newcomers and who have a lot of great stories behind them and really are the future of the business. Whereas you've got a bunch of rehashes in AEW, Chris Jericho, Hurt Syndicate. They've got some new stars there, but none that you could really believe in, like an Orange Cassidy or a Darby Allin. They're people that have been beaten to death so much that now you're asking them to step up in a high-profile storyline to save AEW? What are we doing? What are we doing? So, yeah, it's just a bizarre time in wrestling. And then their biggest star in AEW, Kenny Omega, is making a return in Japan. That's your biggest star. Seriously, what is going on in AEW, man? Like, it's just, like, I've said it for months on this channel, and it's almost like it's falling on deaf ears because, yeah, there are some good things to like about this place, but when you look at like head-to-head competitions and effectively like elections, you've got to evaluate certain things. And I just don't think that AEW really cares. I don't think they really care. They got their money. They got their second TV contract. They've been trumpeting that up. And they keep signing people to put a Band-Aid on what's been plaguing them for the longest time. Is like they don't have long-term stories. They don't have people to invest in. They don't have reasons for fans to come back. You're giving Chris Jericho TV time. Hangman Adam Page, your best performer the last like 6 to 9 months, is embroiled with another great talent in Jay White. Both these guys should be fighting for the world title. They should be fighting for AEW. They should be fighting to save AEW. Swerve Strickland should be doing that. But they're in other storylines. And your division is so stricken down that you're resorting to Orange Cassidy, a mid-carder, who I love. I think he's great. He is a great hand. He's not the type of guy that you're going to believe is going to beat Jon Moxley. He beat him, but that was a year ago. It's just there's a lot of confusing things going on in wrestling. That being said, WWE, at least in the main roster, I've said it on this show, it's been a little bit weird with what they've been doing in terms of Rhea Ripley. Rhea Ripley's been written out of television. I guess she really fractured her orbital bone, which is that is kind of a frightening injury, but we'll see how that goes. I've always thought that they could extend Rhea and live out as far as they could, but I don't like the way they're building Raquel Rodriguez. I did not like that. Really quickly here, just to kind of tie this thing up and kind of take you around the last week or so that I've been gone. because that's really what this podcast and this video is about, is like, going off the top rope on the biggest topics in wrestling. Crown Jewel was what I expected. The Liv Nia match was a joke. It was a joke. I mean, you're trying to build up a prestigious championship. It tells you everything you know. It's all about the Saudis. Heavy interference. Nia gets rolled up. Liv wins. Good for Liv. I think Liv's great, and she's had a really good year. But the booking behind her it's gotten a little bit cartoonish. Like the Dom stuff has gotten weird. I thought Tiffany Stratton could have factored in a little bit more. At some point, Tiffany Stratton's going to be a champion, which I think is going to happen sooner rather than later. Because I just think that, like, I don't know how much longer this Nia Jax title reign really has, to be honest with you. Because once you get past Naomi, she's already beaten Bayley. You've got Tiffany Stratton. It's just like once you get past that, there's not a whole hell of a lot left for Nia to do. And she already took a loss. Granted, it was heavy interference with Liv Morgan. So we'll see what happens. But that was something that jumped out to me. Like it's really weird that the main roster women's division is so much more significantly weaker than what's going on in NXT. Like I said, there was 2 matches bookended an NXT show from the historic 2300 arena in Philadelphia. You had a street fight with 2 women, 2 of the up-and-comers in Jada Parker and Lola Vice, and then you had 10 women who are clearly the future of WWE in the main event of this show. I don't know if it's a Triple H thing. I don't know if it's just like, hey, Shawn Michaels doesn't want to let some of these women go. But yeah, you've got, like, at some point they're going to need to evolve this division on the main roster. And I think part of it is, like, they haven't done a really good job of building up a lot of these women outside of, like, the main characters, whether it be a Bayley, an Io Sky, Bianca Belair, or Jade Cargill, Nia Jax, Tiffany Stratton, like, or specifically on Raw, which has really been hamstrung because there's really been one major women's storyline going since WrestleMania, and that's Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. That's been the main thing. And now with Rhea off television, I don't know where this thing goes. So there's been some problems, specifically with the women's division. In terms of Crown Jewel, Cody Gunther, I haven't watched the entire match. I saw the finish. I was a little surprised Cody won. But if anybody was going to beat Gunther, it was probably Cody. Because there's only been like 3 or 4 people in WWE that have pinned Gunther clean. I think it's Ilya, Dragunov, Braun Breaker, Sami Zayn, and now Cody. So that was a little bit surprising. Yeah, I mean, Kevin Owens and Randy Orton didn't have a match. That was a little bit disappointing, but I'm not surprised. LA Knight had a great match, retaining over Carmelo Hayes and Andrade. So that was fun. You have Jade and Bianca retaining the tag team titles. Yeah, it's just it was fine, but it wasn't. This is the problem, and I think this is kind of just the residual things of Vince signing that contract with the Saudi Arabian government, is they're going to have to do 2 of these a year. And I think it's a 10-year contract, and they signed it in 2018. So this is going to be going on for a while. And it is what it is, man. But I'm glad that we got past it. I'm glad we're on the road to Survivor Series. The Bloodline stuff is looking really good, especially with Sami Zayn potentially showing up later in the week. To potentially join the OG Bloodline against Solo's Bloodline, and we'll heat up that storyline. Interesting times in wrestling, and a lot of choosing and a lot of picking and choosing going on. So, like I said, NXT and AEW is really, it's almost like an election, and I just don't know how, if you're AEW, you can look at some of these metrics on multiple head-to-head situations and think that you're doing a good job when you're losing to the 3rd show in WWE on a regular basis. It's just, it's weird. All right. Anyway, we'll have more stuff here on the channel, more sports-related content. We'll have some wrestling content, maybe a SmackDown review, because it feels like SmackDown's going to be a big show with more of the Bloodline stuff starting to heat up. We're getting towards Survivor Series, which is going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.